gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
You need this. Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm going to tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. And this week, we're talking about B2B marketing lessons from business influencers with co-founder and CMO of Dreamdata.
Anything meaningful and good takes real time and effort. You have to work for it.
Please recognize the world we're living in.
The world is abundant. If you're good enough, you can get yours too.
How do I feel motivated? I'm grateful. I'm gratitude. Somebody's always got it worse. One life. Do something about it.
Steffen, how are you?
Ian, I'm good. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on the show. It's a late evening there in Copenhagen and an early morning here in the beautiful sunny Bay Area. And boy, am I thrilled to talk about Dreamdata, talk about influencers, some sponsorships, and all the cool stuff that you're up to. First question: why the heck did you pick business influencers to talk about today?
So the podcast is called Remarkable, and I was trying to think through kind of who in my kind of little bubble is remarkable to me, whether that's, companies or people that find their way into my sphere. And then I started to think about, I'll mention 4 that I'm consuming and that I'm listening to quite often. And that's like Chris Walker. I think if you're using LinkedIn, it's hard to avoid Chris. It's Jason Lemkin, the founder of SaaStr. It's Gary Vaynerchuck, which I've been following for like 10, 15 years by now, I think. And then it's April Dunford. And these are all professionals that I cannot almost not stop myself from continuing to consuming their content. And I've even bought like Gary V merch 1 or 2 times. And I think like these people are capable of putting out consistently large volumes of content without ever actually sacrificing on quality. And I think I just know whenever a podcast appears in my feed, I know it's high quality. I can switch it on and they occupy 1 to 2 hours of my brain every week. So I thought that would definitely be a worth a mention for somebody who's succeeding with. I've never met them in real life. They live far away from me, but still I do consume their content every week. I've bought April's books. I've bought Jason's SaaStr tickets. I've bought Gary Vaynerchuck's merch in his latest book. And Chris Walker, I've been doing live podcasts with as well. So it's through a massive content effort, they've enforced their way through to my marketing world.
I love it. So exciting. What a great topic. And I'm really excited to dig in because this is one of my faves. Zooming out, tell us a little bit about Dreamdata and your role as CMO and co-founder.
Yeah, so it's as you know, when you run your own company, it's an ever-changing role, and it's not always the typical job description of what a CMO does. Sometimes it's making coffee, sometimes it's hiring people, sometimes it's actually doing real marketing. But it's been a continuously evolving position. In the beginning, when we were just 3 people, I was doing all the sales, I was doing all the marketing, and when I did one of the things, the other thing didn't work, and so forth. Nowadays, we actually have a marketing team of 6, 7 people. So I try to keep those guys busy. And the model we run at Dreamdata has been historically, we've been pretty much 100% inbound led. So what we do at Dreamdata is in marketing is that we have to be the ones that keeps our AEs busy. And we do that through marketing. And once they come to our website, it gets handed over to the salespeople.
Meredith, what the heck are business influencers and who are these people he's talking about?
Great question.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
So I should specify that we're talking about business influencers, not as in people that companies hire to represent them and create content, but we're talking about folks who have had their own businesses, found success, and now are sharing their expertise with others to share how, other people can find the same amount of success.
Those who influence others, spheres of influence in the community.
That's right.
I think you could also boil it down to these are people who are spheres of influence who are almost all authors in some form or fashion. Jason co-wrote a book, From Possible to Inevitable. Gary's written 1 million books. April obviously has Obviously Awesome, which is a super famous book. And Chris, I don't know if Chris has actually written a book, but he's done enough podcast and content stuff and I'm sure they've written other types of books that are fine. So I think close enough, but I would say definitively people who have built a POV on the world and created content in that vertical. And through that became an influencer of an influence, again, like a sphere of influence. But great point, Meredith. It's not like Instagram influencers or things like that.
Right. It's not like influencer marketing, in other words. But yeah, so I know we've named a couple already. Steffen, you mentioned Gary Vaynerchuck, aka Gary V. He's the one I'm most familiar with. So I kind of chose him as an example. But we've also mentioned April Dunford, Jason Lemkin, Chris Walker. And so Gary V, for example, he started out in the wine business, which was a family business. And now he's grown this huge media company. I saw him, I think, on Hot Ones. He is literally everywhere. And so he's putting out short videos. He's got content across all these different social platforms. Like you mentioned, Ian, he's got bunches of books out. But when I was looking back in his background, the reality is he's been in the digital space. He's been online since basically the beginning of the internet. These people are we're seeing them now in their success, but they've been working towards this success for years. And I think we've seen that with a lot of content or a lot of examples of content that we've covered in the past where it's we see their success, we think it's come about faster than it actually has. And so when we talk about Gary Vee, he started blogging in 2006. And he said, I didn't see success for 18 months. There was nothing going on. I had a blind belief in the thesis. I just believed. And so it wasn't very difficult to stay the course. I knew that it was going to take a long time for the internet to manifest itself, but I was willing to play it out. Back then, there was no million views. There was no million followers. I was just grateful for what I was getting. He said, I think a lot of people aren't grateful for the building process. I enjoy the process more. I like the beginning. Now, just that statement, I think is a gold mine for what we want to talk about today, which is success takes time, right? And consistency. And I like what he said about believing in the thesis because Gary Vee, when you hear him talk, it's he has so much conviction and talks with so much certainty that I think it's easy to kind of believe whatever he says. You know what I mean? So believe in the thesis. He wasn't getting any feedback saying he was doing something right. He just believed he was doing the right thing. And so I think just start and believe in yourself and believe in your purpose and your process. And then he said, enjoy the process, right? He said he liked the beginning. He liked just putting out content and being consistent. And then the third thing I sort of took away with it is these people have all built their personal brand. And so I think it takes a lot of time, effort, consistency, all of those things to put out content, build your messaging. And a lot of that goes back to that sort of conviction behind your purpose. And so, Steffen, I'm wondering, looking at these business influencers, what sort of value have you gotten from them? How are you using them? You said you listen to them a lot. Is it podcasting? How are you getting that info? And then how are you using it?
Good question. I think maybe just to add to what you said about Gary Vee and goes for the others as well, is that they're actually running real businesses and they're doing this, what you in popular talk call building in public. So they say they're going to do stuff, but you can also follow their journey towards actually achieving those goals. And that, that's when it goes from just being a random influence on Instagram to actually somebody who shows you how they're building their business in public. So it becomes very trustworthy when they do it. And when you think about what they've actually been building, now we call them business influencers, but what they've actually built for themselves are their own personal brands, become sort of media companies. They have an audience. I think if you look at Gary Vee's YouTube, I think it's a channel with 2 million followers. Think about any idea that he can launch through an audience of 2 million people. It's so impressive. Now, what have I taken out of it? I think each of them, are kind of somewhat of a marketing mastermind group for myself. I can name anecdotes for all of them that really has changed how I feel about marketing. April Dunford, mentioned the book. Ian, obviously awesome, has really changed. I didn't know what positioning on categories was before I started looking at that book and thinking about the importance of, if we say we are this, what does investors think? What does the market? What does the customer think when we're in a competition with a competitor? If we claim we are this and they say that, like, how do we go about it? And each of these people, I kind of like small micro advisors for me in my world, where I take what they do and try to reflect, what can I copy to my world? And I listened to a podcast with Jason Lemkin a few weeks back, where he said that, I think he said he had scheduled LinkedIn posts from now until New Year's Eve or something like that.
Yeah.
Like 2 times a day. And I immediately the next day said to one of our people in marketing, go take all my posts for the last 2 years, schedule a post that goes out 9 a.m. in California every day for the next 30 days. And this is running right now. So if you guys, I think I'm connected with you guys, so you'll see that my intensity of posts that are coming out has gone up quite significantly. And I think that is when and probably also what I like about these 4 people that I mentioned is that they're able to not just talk fluff, but show tangible examples that you can steal. Like Chris Walker he's doing like weekly AMA sessions. He's doing like, if you follow his podcast, he's on like releasing 3 podcasts a week. And it's just true inspiration and not fluff. It's like something you can do yourself and help grow your business with as well. And it's working.
I actually would push back on the last part a little bit of you could do it yourself. I actually don't think you can just like sort of like get started. And I know that that's a big message of this is like you have to get started. And I do think you have to do that. But I think that like, to me, when I look at these 4 people, all 4 of them had a super specific point of view at the very beginning. When they started their sort of content journey, they started in a niche with an extremely specific point of view, and then they built outward. And I think that a mistake that people make is that they don't have a point of view that's clear, and so they just publish a bunch of stuff, and they wonder why they're not building an audience in a certain area, or they wonder why they're not building, a following. And I see this a lot with venture capitalists specifically. Like, they'll be like, why don't more people follow me? And it's like, well, like, you don't talk to anyone. You know what I mean? It's like, are you trying to talk to your LPs? Are you trying to talk to your startups? Are you trying to talk to like big business of like why they should be investing in your startups? And you contrast that with Jason Lemkin, who has he's like an idea machine. He thinks constantly. I interviewed Jason a number of years ago, and he said, he's like, I never turn off. He's like, if I'm at a kid's soccer game, it's like I have 50 ideas going in my head, right? So like, he's an idea machine. So I think copying Jason is actually extremely hard to do, because he actually has ideas for posts out through the end of the year, not just posts, right? Like he has like carefully crafted ideas for all of those things that he thinks about. Another thing with Jason that I'll hone in on specifically, and this is something I've talked about a little bit, that I listened to this interview with Seth Godin, and he was talking about how his blog changed from sort of like good to great in sort of his estimation when he stopped trying to tell people things and started trying to ask people questions. And I think that is Jason. His posts today versus 5 years ago are really good because they open the doorway to discussion rather than, I'm going to tell you how it is. And like, he has a bunch of content that's sort of like, hey, you need to hire a VP of sales. This is what I think, makes a good VP of sales. This, and this. You don't have to do it super early, but be careful, if you don't, or whatever it is. And so he's saying, I saw this at the companies I built. I'm using my personal experience. I see this across the portfolio that I manage and things that I'm hearing. And so what you get is this like really authentic, really genuine point of view that no one can copy. Like, you couldn't just roll out and be Jason Lemkin tomorrow. Like, you really couldn't. And that's super unique. You couldn't roll out of bed and be Gary V. But I think that like, you look at Jason, you're like, he started this whole thing, by being a founder, by making a lot of mistakes. He told me actually on the podcast interview, he's like, I never should have sold. He's like, it was a huge mistake. He's like, this is the biggest mistake that I made in my career was selling. He's like, if you just look at our competitive landscape, he's like, I could have just walked that company to like 100 million ARR, 500 million ARR. He's like, if you just look at the numbers, he's like, that was crazy that I sold. Which, he's done pretty well with that money and built out SaaStr and built out the fund and all that. So he's done, probably more impactful work, arguably. But like the idea though, again, that he is so critical of himself and his career and the things that he sees around him. Like that's a really hard, honest, open, transparent discussion that he is having. And I would argue he's probably not a build in public guy. Like a little bit he is, but it's more just about transparency in what he sees, and he calls it how it is. And he's talking about stuff that people don't want to talk about, like, quiet quitting or people not caring enough to work hard in startups and things like that, some people disagree with, some people don't. But I think that the era of transparency, I think Gary V's, the same way, and we can get into all that, but starts with the POV.
Yeah, and it's about authenticity, that you can hear that these are real experiences. It's things that they've tried. Jason can say these things because he's been in the trenches. Like that to me is the people I want to listen to. It's people who've done things themselves that you can trust, that it might not be a universal truth, but it's at least something that they've tried themselves and experienced, and now they're sharing this story with you. That's what really makes it convincing to me.
As a CEO, as myself, I feel like there are lessons that because you read them in a business book, but sometimes you have to really experience either the high or the extreme pain on your own to really feel and learn those types of lessons.
Yeah, and on Gary V, I mean, for me, I don't know when you first, found out about Gary V, but I read Jab, 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 Right Hook in like 2014, so like a decade ago, and I was like hooked. I was like, oh, this is so clearly what's happening, right? With social media, with all this, like that there's a way to do this. There's a way to deliver to your audience something great. And then once you deliver on that audience, to that audience over and over and over and over and over again, then you can ask them for something back rather than the alternative. Like that's a lesson which, whether it's the 80-20 rule or whatever it is, that's a lesson that is as true today as it was when he wrote it in 2013. And to me, that's what gave Gary the credibility. Like again, he built a what is it, wine library. Like it's super cool business, but he wasn't, like a super famous person from that. He's a super famous person from his ideas being extremely well, clearly defined and delivered in a way, that people can see. I also think that there's something really important here to think about, that these people wrote books. It's hard to write a book. Like it's hard to write a great book. It's even harder to write a great book. And not to say that you need to write a book, but I think it's a really good takeaway that if you can write a book and you have a good idea for it, I'm not saying you should do it or shouldn't do it, but it does give you credibility. It gives you a ton of credibility, and it's a lot of work. But if it succeeds, then you can do really well. He had written books before, Jab, 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 Right Hook. So by the time I had seen that book, he was already pretty popular. But the idea is like, coming out with something that is novel or something easy to understand. And then from there, you're like, oh, this person is smart. You know what I mean? The other thing, so then with April, I think obviously Awesome is sort of like a seminal work right now in startups, right? Is like, she is the expert on B2B positioning, which is great because she's a positioning person and we all think that she's the expert in B2B positioning, which is exactly what she wanted.
This is the value that I can provide for customers that no one else can. And we're always going to win in there. Even if it's competitive, we're always going to beat the other guys because we got this set of things that they don't have.
And so I interviewed her a couple of years ago, and she was like, that's all I care about, is speaking to that audience.
And she even goes as far as says, it's positioning for B2B tech companies nowadays. So it's
B2B tech companies.
She knows exactly who she wants to be an advisor for and keeps repeating that message.
Yeah, and that's all she does is that one thing over and over and over again, which is like you take that versus Gary V. Gary V is completely over-indexed on I shouldn't say over-indexed. He's indexed on a million different categories. He has all sorts of stuff going on. He has all sorts of content going on. He's very experimental with the way that he creates content. He's doing stuff like going on YouTube Live and just like recording his office conversations. Have you seen this, Meredith?
I have, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just records his office live in meetings without the sound on, and then randomly will like come up and say stuff. I'm like, to me, that's like a crazy idea. like crazy as in like, I think that's a bad idea. Not saying that, like, if we had sat in a room, we're like, hey, Ian, let's record all of our meetings and broadcast it. I'd be like, I don't think that's that good of an idea. I'm not really an idea hater.
But another way to think about it, Ian, is that he's also constantly experimenting.
Exactly.
And he's constantly trying, okay, this didn't work, but okay, then I try to take a photo with a dog in it or whatever. So I think that him and his team are extremely good at running constant experiments. And yeah, sometimes it fails. But if there's this culture that we know that everything is an experiment, and we listen to then how the crowd or the audiences react once we put it out, and then we do more of these things that don't work. But if we don't continue the experimentation culture, then we will not find the next big thing that's going to be driving the conversation with the audience.
I've got some weird elements that people can't run my playbook, but I couldn't run other people's playbook. So pay attention, find what works for you, try shit, try it multiple times. Steve said something you like, try it once. Didn't work? Steve's not an idiot. You don't suck. Try it again.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why I would say sort of like it's a bad idea is not because it's actually a bad idea. I think just most people would be like, why would anyone watch people work? And the truth of the matter is, like, if those streams are getting 250 people, 50 people, 5 people that are following along, and it costs his team basically no money to do it, well, that's 5 more people that are hanging out with Gary for a few hours. Maybe they're sitting at home in their house, wherever it is, and they just want a buddy who's working too. Like, that's where you get at, the accumulation of all of the work that he's doing then is able to sort of penetrate all sorts of different ways of consumption. And that is super valuable. It's like he's not just creating in one way, he's creating in so many different ways that it will reach you in some form or fashion, right? It's like some way it'll get to you.
Yeah, the lesson I've taken from myself is really that, like, you need to do work and then you need to tell the world about it. And then, like, in this constant cycle of documenting, this is what we've done today. Here's the example. Move on to the next thing. And little by little, like the snowball starts rolling, and you grow your audience little by little by continuously putting out stuff.
And then with Chris Walker has been able to build an audience, a very, very large audience in a very short amount of time comparatively, by focusing exclusively on LinkedIn. It's not 100% exclusive, but more or less by focusing on a single channel and putting a bunch of very smart thought leadership content out there, and really just building a muscle of a certain type of publishing and post writing that's extremely in depth, using information and proprietary information that he's learning and putting it out there in a very rigorous way. And he has a machine behind it. So all 4 of these people, they have a very clear content machine that is backed up to them. They have a team that supports their efforts. It's like Jason has the team at SaaStr. Gary V obviously has a huge team that does all that stuff. Chris has a team at Paceto and Refine that was doing that stuff. And April, is an author that, had a team that helped bring that book out there. So they have a content team that I like to say sort of like backs up the machine to the thought leader, right? They have ideas. This is the machine that gets them out there. They all have a muscle that they've built to consistently, repeatedly get new ideas out there into the market. And they have a unique point of view, and they use a lot of authenticity and experience, and they're very well researched, whether it's through anecdotal information, whether it's through other types of research, so that they can back up their stuff. All of those things put together is hard as hell to do. Like, there's a reason why there's not that many people doing that. It is really, really hard to do all that. You have to have a person who's very smart. You have to have the content machine. You have to have, this consistent, repeatable piece. You have to be able to package those ideas in stuff that is very simple and easy to understand. All of those people have branded their content in a way, right? Like all of them have phrases and things that they've created that they've used for positioning to, build movements or information around the different topics, whether it's dark social with Chris, a million things that Gary Vee, but right now he's talking day trading attention is his new thing. Obviously the positioning piece with April, and Jason with all the stuff for SaaStr and really making this SaaS category so clear and obvious to everybody. Like, again, that's a lot of really rigorous work on the front end to position all of your ideas in a way that's easy to digest for other people so that you have like these anchor pieces of content that you can go back to over and over again. Again, like that's just really hard to do.
I agree, Ian, absolutely. But to not scare people off, like these people we're talking here, they're publishing on video, on text and voice, all of them, which probably because they're exceptional communicators. But if you're sitting out there just wanting to get started, just find peace in doing one of those disciplines where you are a good writer or you're good at communicating verbally or you do well on video, and just dip your toes in whatever of those that you feel that you're strongest in. And if you want to get started, you don't have to do all of those disciplines at once. Just if you like writing, just start by writing and see where that takes you.
Yeah, and so that's the problem set. Answering it, I totally agree. I think you have to get started. I think you have to figure out, how you want to get started. I think that it starts with audience. Who exactly do you want to talk to? And obviously niche down as much as you possibly can to try to figure out who really you feel like you can serve the best. And then figure out, okay, if I want to talk to these people for the next 5 years, what is the type of stuff that I want to talk about? You should probably go talk to those people. Hopefully you have a background in that if you want to go with the very super authentic route. If you don't have a background, then you need to find a way into being authentic, which means you need to talk to people who are having those problems and pull them into your content, right? So whether that's an interview series or something like that, you probably need to be doing your own research of some kind if you want to get that level of authenticity. So I highly recommend you should be doing your own research. On this show, we've heard this many times, and on my other marketing podcasts, that some of the best stuff that always consistently does well is original research reports. So like anytime you can do any original research, I think Chris Walker made a really good use case for that, of doing original research on their customers using their data and information. So I think that that's like a key part of this. I think you have to set a POV. I think it's a really helpful exercise to sort of like try to name something, name the movement that you think is coming, like lean forward and say, if I was going to predict that something is happening, or if I was to put a name to something that's happening, that it would be called this. Maybe that's the name of your podcast or your show. Maybe that's the name of your blog. As an example to this, we're working with a customer and we're talking about liquidity and balance sheets, and this is something probably most people don't think about. But like if you're Apple and they have whatever, they have $500 million in the bank or whatever they have, I don't even know. They have $500 million in the bank, right? Like that's basically the equivalent of, like the GDP of places, right? So they have all this money in the bank. Well, they have to do something with that money. It doesn't just sit there. They're going to invest it or they're going to do other things with it, right? Every company goes through this problem. And so we were talking to this company and we said, it's kind of like an invisible vault. It's like this vault full of gold. But if you have multiple currencies and you have all this stuff, well, maybe it's an invisible vault because you don't really know what your cash is doing at any given time. So let's start to think about that. So anyways, we call the podcast The Invisible Vault, and we're talking about how to access liquidity, what to do with your cash when you have it sitting in the bank, whether it's, you're a small business with, $10,000 in your bank, or whether it's, a large enterprise of 500 million, you still should be doing something with your cash. Like it should be working for you. By giving it a name, the Invisible Vault, all of a sudden it feels like something, versus if we had made sort of like the Cash podcast or what, I don't even know what it is, but you know what I mean? It's like, I think that exercise is really helpful to like try to put a name to the thing that you see in the world that is different. Because if you do that, and then you go tell people like, hey, I was thinking that, this is the subscription economy. This is this. Like, does that sound right to you? And then you might get to an idea or springboard to another idea that is a big enough idea to create a book, to say, what would my book be? And what is my big enough idea that I could fill this whole thing out and get a bunch of information there? And then once you have that, and maybe you write it, maybe you don't, but then it's like, oh, you could potentially be someone who is a thought leader who is bringing something into the space and has some positioning and some wrapping around it, like all four of those people did. Okay, moving on to how you think about content at Dreamdata. Tell us, what's your content strategy and how's it been going?
Yeah, so from the get-go, content has been a big bet from us at Dreamdata. I think mainly because I'm such a believer in the internet and, what we talked about before, that you need to spread the word about what you do. So there's three things about content which I want to mention. One is that initially, when you start a company, the hierarchy of what you produce in terms of content, for me at least, needs to be very steered by feedback from your sales team. So making sure that you listen to a lot of sales calls, so you hear what questions are the salespeople constantly being asked. So you, with a marketing approach, instead of, if you can hear a salesperson is being asked the same questions twice or 3 times or 4 times, we as marketers need to think about one-to-many solutions to these questions that they're facing all the time. So as a marketing team fills up the to-do list in terms of content, one part is listening to what is the customers are asking. Do they understand what your product does when they come to your website? So sales enablement and product marketing has been a huge chunk of work for us at Dreamdata. Basically, because I want our website to answer any question that a customer in anywhere, any place in the world could think about asking us, our salespeople. Because if the salespeople gets asked a question, we as marketers are able to invest a lot of time in actually writing a really elaborate, well-written answer to these questions. And that will make the next sales conversation a lot easier for the sales team. So one loop is a super tight collaboration with sales team and listening to what are the questions that they're facing all the time. The next thing in terms of content at Dream that I would say is that there's a lot of things in the B2B go-to-market world that we cannot control. Like some customers might be late stage in your sales pipeline, but mentally they're still top funnel or vice versa. So people are all over this kind of buying journey all the time. The one thing we can control in marketing is that we can ensure that we have a high output of content, and we can ensure that that content is of the highest quality all the time when we release it. So that whether it's somebody who's making a decision whether to buy or not, whenever they're being exposed by a podcast that we've been part of, we know it's high quality. And that's probably what could be convincing that customer to move on with deciding whether they should be going with us or not. So high quality, high frequency output is something that we as marketers can always control. So those two first things, make sure that you listen to what are the customers telling your sales team, exhaust those questions through well-written content, and then produce a lot of high-quality content that can ensure that you can always stay top of mind with the customers that you're trying to target. And then I would say the last thing, which is, at least to me, is one of the hardest disciplines, is ensuring distribution of your content as well, which is, you might have written the world's best blog post or original research, as you talked about, Ian. But if you actually do not get that piece of content distributed throughout the internet, it's never actually going to be driving any value for your business, because you've just invested a lot of time in producing a piece of content. But you need to bring it in front of the right prospects, the right ideal customer profiles out there. So it's super important that you think through carefully how not only do you write these pieces of content of high quality, but you need to figure out what is the distribution plan that we're going with for each piece of content.
When you say each piece of content, how do you think about that? Because I feel the same way. That's what we do too, but I'm curious how you think about it.
Each piece is probably also exaggerated. The thing you should have in mind for every piece of content, is this something that is a URL that the sales team will need in 1 out of 20 cases? Okay, fine. We probably don't need a distribution plan for them. For that, they're just going to fetch the URL when they need it. But for example, tomorrow we're releasing a benchmark report about B2B ad spend, and we've invested a lot of time about like designing graphs that look sexy for social media, and we've written really long posts for it. And if we invest all this time, this has taken a couple of weeks to prepare. And if we don't have a good way of actually distributing these pieces of content, then all the investment we made in writing it is wasted. So when we're releasing this, we're going to post it in our community, in our Slack community. It's going out on our newsletter list to more than 10,000 people. It's going out through all our employees' LinkedIn profiles. We are actively pitching podcasts where we can go talk about these benchmarks that we've come up with. So there's a string of activities that we're following up the original piece of content that we've made to try to do these things, because the purpose of the content is to be valuable for people and also for our business. And the way it is that it gets in front of a lot of people that would then hopefully show up at our doorstep when they need a product that does what we do.
And you've had some viral moments. Can you tell us about that?
And we've had quite a good few by now at Dreamdata. Also, I think it's very supported by us posting a lot on LinkedIn, because it's a constant feedback loop of, is this good? Is this funny? Is this valuable? For a period, we did a lot of memes that went like insanely viral, that has been viewed by millions of people on LinkedIn. And I think this is probably also an output of, as you say, Ian, you need to decide a point of view and who you're talking to. For us, it's B2B marketers. And because we're super narrow on those, like a meme can be a way to express a good sense of humor. And that really, really, really travels well on social media. So for example, some might have seen that kind of that cheerleader with another cheerleader on top of it, where it said like, sales closing the deal, but there's like 1 million marketing touches beneath it. And that was one of my co-founders that, just played around with it. And suddenly it just went like crazy viral. It has been viewed by millions of people literally now. What we're then doing is that we are also thinking about these things that go viral as like a laboratory for what can we put in front of cold audiences that we deliberately want to reach. So we have a list of probably around 10,000 accounts, companies in the world that fits our definition of an ideal customer profile. And we know once something has gone viral, it's of a significantly high content quality. So we can use stuff like LinkedIn ads to make sure that it gets pushed in front of these people, because it's already been proven through crazy engagement rates that it's a great piece of content. So we utilize the fact that something organically went viral, and then we put money behind it to open the doors on accounts that we do want to reach, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What is measurable versus not measurable? And how do you make sure that it can be measurable?
Good question. I think this is like anything. Measurement is like an eternal discipline in marketing. And obviously, all of us marketers want to measure as much as we can, so we know what works, and we can defend our budgets and get even more budget the next time budgeting season comes around. But not all disciplines are as such measurable, and I think you need to measure it in a way that it lends itself to being measurable. Stuff like ads, SEO, how many leads do you collect, etc. It's very measurable disciplines, but stuff like a podcast, as we see here, needs to be carried more by qualitative measurement. So that could be, are people mentioning the podcast on a sales call? Do people write about the podcast online? Then you need to take screenshots. I think one thing that we've found that is a way to take unmeasurable stuff and make them measurable is whenever we have viral content, we also then enroll it into measurable things. So we use thought leader ads, for example, a lot on LinkedIn. So once something works organically on LinkedIn, we put money on top of it, and then we can measure what is the investment we're doing in this piece of content and how much revenue are we seeing coming out of it afterwards. So that's a few thoughts, Ian. There's two tangible things that I probably want to say about measurable, not measurable. One thing is that if you're in doubt whether something works or doesn't, and you have no proof that it works, it probably doesn't work. So stop that activity. Try something else.
And you even said that, like, anecdotally, if someone is posting about it, if someone tells you about it, like, those are enough proof points to at least continue exploring whether or not it's worth it. But if you're not getting anything, perhaps it's time to look at cutting it.
Yeah, no, the other thing I wanted to say is that you should strive to be able to prove that you break even with your marketing activities. And what I mean by that is that in marketing, we're spending a lot of money, hard-earned money for your company. And you cannot continue to spend this budget on things that do not work. So you hosted an event, you got one customer, and you can see those two, the money you spent makes up for the money you make. Then you should be satisfied and not be scared of trying it again. Whereas if you got 0 customers out of it, you probably want to stop it. But for like small businesses, don't upset more about it than just being able to prove that this broke even.
I totally agree with that. I think that people obsess over like 3.5x ROAS and all these other things because they're so analytical with the way that you do paid spend. But it's like for other types of initiatives, I mean, this is how I personally believe, where it's like a sponsorship or something like that. I'm like, if you're dealing with small numbers, right? So it's like something that gets 5 opportunities created and doesn't close a deal. It's like, well, those are 5. If they were real at-bats for you, that's pretty significant, right? You should be closing about between 10 and 20%, I'd hope. So it's like, those are the sort of things that I think people, when you're at a huge company, you're looking at a much larger data set. When you're a smaller company, it's like, it's just, you're not going to have statistically significant information from these small tests. You're really not. So it's like, you just have to believe a little bit that you're serving your audience by doing those things.
Yeah, and I think about it typically as planting seeds, and some trees grow faster than others. So if you can see like within the short term that one of them got you to break even, then if you were in front of the right people with the right message, some of them will come back in 6 months or 12 months or something like that. So don't be afraid of just continuing the investment if you do have the evidence that this at least broke even for us.
So what's working for your audience right now?
So we're doing so much content, and I think I want to point to something that not a lot of companies is doing right now, and that is LinkedIn live shows. We do them almost weekly. We're bringing in guests that we know have something really valuable to offer for our audiences. So we're lining up really high quality speakers. April Dunford has been there, as we talked about. Chris Walker has been there. Like we've really identified a lot of highly relevant people for our B2B marketing audience, and we're bringing in high quality guests every week. And it works great together with our sales team's motion of it can be hard to get a meeting booked, but saying yes to watch Ryan Fishkin for an hour being interviewed by somebody, that's very easy to say yes to. It's completely free. You just listen in. So we do these lives with people that are relevant for our audience. Our sales team invites their prospects. I invite all the people that I'm connected to that is relevant for this show. So these people constantly stay top of mind and engage with our brand for a very long time. But this live show is not just live at that one point. We can also recycle it. The sound tape from those live shows go into our podcast. The best of lives, we make blog posts. Those blog posts, they go out on our newsletter. They get feeded into our Slack community. We cut out small videos of that live show and put back on LinkedIn. So this LinkedIn live thing that in the beginning, it's hard to do because it's a muscle. It's some strength that you need to build up. But I think that is really something that is working for us now. And people are highly engaged watching these conversations with, we call them business influencers up in the beginning of our conversation. But I think the key is that you don't put crap in front of your followers. It needs to be high quality. It needs to be guests that are able to communicate so that they bring value to your audience, and you also piggyback a little bit on their audience.
It's one of the things we see making shows that there are good guests and there are guests that are not as good. That's obvious. But the top guests have, some level of storytelling and experience and really unique insights. And other guests maybe don't have that. They still have great stories to tell. They just need a little bit more help to tell those stories. That's why creating a series like a podcast or something like that, where you can do it in post, allows you to elevate the stories that are not as good, the people that are not as good storytellers. Whereas if you go live, you got to have someone who can talk live. Like if you have someone who's boring, it's going to be boring. And so it's a great point that bringing in the heavy hitters for live events is really key.
Yeah, I've had half an hour conversations with people that felt like hours. And then I've also had conversations with people where it was an hour, but it felt like just 15 minutes. So be picky about check their backgrounds, listen to what they've done before the guests, before you say yes to them.
Dreamdata, a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, a lot of great content. You launched Audience Hub recently. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so this is like the whole vision for Dream that is really about empowering B2B marketers to be successful. And one product that we've just released is called Audience Hub. And essentially it's the ultimate list building feature. So us people in marketing and go-to-market in general, we make lists of everybody, everything in this world. Like who should we ask for reviews? Who should we ask to come on shows? Who participated in our webinars? And this has really been restricted to only people who could write SQL or code if they wanted to join CRM data together with the webinar tool and the CS tool. The Audience Hub is just what's called no code. Click on a button, select whoever you want to reach, and then we pull together all this data from all your go-to-market tools. And then all marketers using Dreamdata can build these lists that are dynamically updated all the time. And what goes along with these lists of audiences is an ability to then actually also sync these back into Google and LinkedIn, so you don't have to manually sit and refresh lists all the time. But the most exciting part is really this audience building feature, because it allows you to go into a data warehouse that contains all your go-to-market data from any data silo in one place. And then you can build these lists that you need to be building every single day.
Amazing. I'm just pumped to follow along with all the cool stuff that you're building in Dreamdata. It's so important. We've used the product and it's really cool. And we wish y'all nothing but the best. Yeah, it's so necessary. Like we just got to get more data and more information about how we're spending our money and how we're building audiences and how we're thinking about all this stuff. So it's really cool. It's part of the reason why we wanted you on the show. But the other reason, obviously, of course, you have a best-in-class content team. And then you have Dreamdata B2B benchmarks also that have come out recently.
Yeah, that's a feature we've really, really wanted to build for a long time. So if you browse around LinkedIn or the internet, you'll come across these benchmark reports of some company who did something last year or last quarter, or they fetched together some data. We wanted to take that kind of staticness, the deadness out of these benchmarks. So we've built a product where you basically live every day can see how is your ad budget distributed compared to all the B2B companies that are using Dreamdata or the companies that are in your industry or of your company size. It's how are these companies distributing their ad budgets? Are they heavy on Google, heavy on LinkedIn, heavy on Bing or whatever? So the marketers that are using Dreamdata basically gets inspired by each other in a way where these benchmarks are obviously they're anonymous and generalized, so they can compare their own performance against other B2B companies. Like the CMO might be stepping in and asking the demand gen team, how are we doing on LinkedIn? Well, we can then show in which of the 4 quartiles are they? Are they outstanding, or are they spending way too much to get their ads shown? Because now we are comparing hundreds of B2B marketing performances against each other. So hopefully we educate and inspire the B2B marketers to do better work. And it's free.
Yeah. Good caveat. Steffen, it's been awesome having you on the show. This has been great. What's a final piece of advice for other marketing professionals about content?
About content? Okay.
Or marketing in general. It's okay. It can be either.
So I'll go with marketing in general. And I think that's probably what has helped me succeed the most in marketing has been to realize that marketing is only successful if it produces revenue. It's the only way you're going to get respect from the organization. That is, if marketing is driving the revenue of the company. So that means that you cannot be doing random activities where you cannot explain why does this lead to more revenue for our company. Companies love marketers that produce sales pipeline and revenue, but if that's not your focus, you're going to be getting a lot of nasty questions from the rest of the organization. The other thing associated to this is that it needs to be done in a sustainable fashion. So you need to know what are the customer acquisition costs, what is the cost per acquisition that is successful for our company. So if we have an agreement about how much can we spend on attracting a new account in our sales pipeline, well, any marketing activities that stays below that number is a success. So we need to produce revenue, but we also needed to do it at a sustainable cost. And if marketers get those two things right, they'll be very popular marketers in the companies that they work for.
Fantastic. I love it. Steffen, thanks again. We appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
My pleasure.
And listeners, go check out Dreamdata. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.